Well folks, with all the main characters of Trigun spoken of, it's now time for us to get into the theme episodes of the retrospective and discuss some of the talking points laid out by the show. Now, like the theme explorations in the Big O retrospective, I am aware that some points may have already been made, but I like making these theme episodes to make a nice little condensed package of a certain message that the series is trying to tell us, to sort of focus in on the message instead of spreading it out over several character retrospectives. Kind of get to a good meaty moral, you know. And Trigun has many morals to teach us, and I hope to provide good looks at all of them here. So let's start. Now, as we hit the ground running, the first theme I'd like to speak of is Trigun's idea of running away from problems, or more specifically, how doing it usually does not work. This is a very prominent theme in the series, and probably one of the key takeaways from it, and is displayed via the evolution of Meryl and Vash, and their respective dealings with Wolfwood and Millie. Now, these pairs of characters represent different things that people run away from, and different ways of dealing with this, but they both come to the same conclusion that running away from reality is not the best recourse. Wolfwood and Millie represent practical advice to counteract this. You see, for Vash, Wolfwood represents the very real action of taking action against external needs. He's the one telling you that you should probably pay your taxes, that you need to figure out how to cook or get by on a day-to-day basis, how to live in the real world. Millie, on the other hand, represents ideas which apply to us internally. She is the one telling us that we cannot repress how we feel, that we cannot wish away emotion, that we cannot simply decide one day that we are happy or that we are depressed, but instead that we must express ourselves fully so that we can understand how we feel and then come to terms with our emotions and use them constructively, as opposed to just running from them. Now, this obviously sets up Vash as someone who runs away from external problems, and Meryl as someone that runs away from internal problems. However, the fact is that they're both running away from problems. They're just doing it slightly differently, and the problems that they run from are slightly different. Now, Wolfwood is right when he tells Vash to stop running from the world. This is because Vash is scared of the world, or at least certain facts of it. He is a man who sees the world as not necessarily harmful or threatening, but as something that can rock a status quo which he's very content with, or that he thinks he's content with. That status quo, of course, is the idea of out of sight, out of mind. He thinks that since he can physically run from knives, he can physically run away from the problems that knives brings with him. This, of course, isn't true, as Knives makes a point of showing when he goes out of his way to kind of mentally torture Vash by depopulating certain villages, hiring the gun-ho guns, and just causing all-around general bad times for people that Vash is close to. This, of course, shows that you can't necessarily run away from your physical problems. You can't run away from paying your taxes, you can't run away from having to eat, you can't run away from having to pay all those bills that are piling up. And as someone who's had to deal with all those, I understand. Those are things you can't run from. I think we all kind of understand that running away from a physical problem isn't simple, and it's not really something that one can really do. And Vash's character evolution shows that even if we were superhuman, we still wouldn't be able to outrun the world, or at least all of it, and that its aspects will always kind of be with us, and that we need to learn to deal with them. And this is where Wolfwood comes in. Wolfwood tells us that the aspects of the world we don't like will haunt us, and that whether we run or not, we're going to have to deal with them eventually. So we might as well try to deal with them as soon as possible, to resolve the problem in a creative and constructive manner. This way, at least us having to deal with that problem and the hindrances they bring is not in vain. Doing so may be difficult, and I'm sure we've all needed a sort of analog to Nicholas to push us through, but in the long term, tackling our problems head on is probably the best recourse. It's probably best to say, yeah, I should probably learn to cook. Or, yeah, I should probably pay at least, my taxes. Yeah, I should probably figure out what I want to do with my life. Or I should come to terms with the fact that I'm not quite clear on all these things and then set up a pattern or platform to try and create a solution, or at least learn how to create a solution and then go from there. Denial of the problems that the world gives us and denial of the circumstances we live in only extends and compounds problems. And this is both present in Vash's and Meryl's character arcs. We see this with Vash because, while he runs away from Knives instead of, trying to subdue him very early on, Knives goes on to fester in the background. He goes on to try and make Vash's life hell, and he goes on to cause tons of collateral damage. He goes ahead and tries to basically ruin Vash. Now, of course, it's not Vash's fault that Knives is like this. It's not Vash's fault that Knives is out to get him. But it is Vash's problem. But early on, he tries to run from them, and we can see how this compounds and snowballs as he's eventually dragged back in anyways. He doesn't solve the problem early on, and it haunts him, causes a lot of damage, and he still has to solve it later, because running doesn't work. because even if you run from your problems will probably run towards you faster than you can. On the topic of problems running to people, sometimes our problems are already with us. In fact, sometimes they are part of us. They're internal issues. And this is where Meryl's character development comes from. Meryl represents the idea of running away from internal factors, or internal fears. These are factors such as emotional stability, or how one feels about things in the world. And Meryl is the perfect character for representing this. As mentioned earlier in her video, she's running from how she feels about Vash, about the world, and her place in it. She's running from how she feels and tries to rationalize her negative emotions. She doesn't express them, she bottles them up and tries to tell them they're not there. Now, of course, saying that they're not there is saying that, a problem isn't there. Now, it's not a problem she feels certain ways, but it is a problem if she ignores how she feels, because this means she's not dealing with how she feels in a constructive or productive manner. It means that she's simply bottling them up for them to bother her even more. Now, of course, if someone deals with a lot of stress, they become less focused. Their judgment becomes impaired, they make less good decisions, they're prone to doing more erratic and not good things. This isn't a malignant character flaw, but it is a manifestation of instability brought upon by trying to tell yourself how you feel, instead of realizing how you feel and dealing with it after you're aware of it. And Millie, like Wolfwood, helps balance Meryl out. Now, Millie is the emotional equivalent of Wolfwood. She's someone who says you can't run from yourself. You can't run from how you feel and your emotions and your internal factors. And Millie is very honest with her own. She's not afraid to cry. She's not afraid to tell anyone how she feels. She's not afraid to express herself. And while she does go through pain, it's from stuff that's not necessarily in her control. She has to cry from external things, which again, she deals with. She doesn't run from. Because she doesn't run away from her internal fears or how she feels, she's always in touch with herself, and as mentioned in her video, always very stable. She knows how she feels and she knows how to express it, and this allows her to move on in a healthy manner. This shows us that yes, you will be depressed, you will be angry, you will be confused, but if you ignore them, like Meryl does, and you try to run from these things, you're not going to get anything done, and they're going to haunt you anyways. But if, like Millie, we all confront them, or at least accept them and learn how to deal with them, then we will be okay, and we will solve our problems. And solving our problems by looking them head on is one of the key morals of Trigun, and Vash and Meryl learning to do it from external and internal representations, respectively, shows us that it is a very good thing to do. It shows us that we can't run from our problems, but sometimes running towards them will be enough to solve them.